Hello, everybody. This is Steel Rose's podcast. This podcast was created for women by women to elevate women's voices. I am especially excited to introduce you to our guest today. We have Tenia Davis with us. She is an accomplished human resources practitioner, an organizational behavior expert with a distinguished record of leadership in executive positions at top-tier organizations such as Harpo Productions, I Manage, Johnson Publishing Company, and Raise. Tenia's contributions to leadership and mentorship have been recognized by the United States Senate, affirming her dedication to inspiring and developing future leaders. With an MBA from Loyola University Chicago and a PhD from Benedictine University's Center for Values-Driven Leadership, she bridges academic rigor with real-world experience, offering insights that are both practical and actionable. Tenia, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Listeners, I had a hard time this morning with Tenia because I kept talking with her and I kept saying I have to hit record. I'm very excited for you to introduce yourself to the listeners and let them get to know a little bit about your background, how you got your start, how you've made your way through your focus, through what you were working on, and how you became so interested in servant leadership and really molding that.
Wow. Okay. So loaded question. I'll delayer it. I'll start with, I'm a mom of two, and my kids, one wants to run the world, as I was sharing, and one wants to save it. So they're polar opposites. So I always feel like I have to show up as a different person every time I talk to each one. But anyway, I will get to that. I'm a mom, a wife, an employee, an entrepreneur, and just loving life and trying to contribute the best way I can and leave a strong legacy for my kids. I kind of fell into human resources. I started my career as a techie, and the project I was working on had to quickly stand up in HR departments, and I was voluntold into the role, and for different reasons. And from there, I said, wow, I like that there's this spectrum of activities that take place under one umbrella. I started in HR when it was personnel and have gone through the evolution to strategic HR, which is so exciting. And through that evolution, I've worked with and for many leaders, and one leader in particular that I really admire and respect modeled the behaviors of a servant leader. At the time, no one was using the term servant leader, but Tim Bennett, who was the president and CEO of an organization I worked for, was just an amazing leader. And I thought, that's the kind of leader I want to be when I grow up. And, he led this team of type A individuals and was able to get the best out of everyone. And I wanted to model that leadership style. And when I took on the challenge of my PhD program, I don't know if I was insane at the time or what, but no, it was a great journey. One of the things I really wanted to study, learn, and understand was how a servant leader creates success, and is that servant leader able to carry those characteristics on to other organizations. So a lot of my research was around servant-led organizations and the individuals that kind of morphed into their leadership chops, and were they able to move those on to other organizations. So that's kind of how I sparked my interest. I've seen phenomenal leaders, and I've seen leaders that just want to run from. And always want to create an environment where all employees feel that they can thrive and contribute and produce their best work. And it starts with leadership. Good leaders can really create a cocoon of success, and leaders that don't have or are not fully developed as leaders can really harm a company culture.
It's interesting to hear you. You're basically like reaffirming a lot of what myself and former coworkers and former colleagues, like we all, talk to each other still. And it's been a great pleasure to grow in my industry. I work in marketing and communications, and it's funny because I remember being like the new kid, and I was always, being the youngest person in the organization, and you were like the baby, and everybody kind of like coddled a little bit. And now that I've had about 18 years in my industry, I don't know if it's reassuring or affirming or whatever it is, but it feels very good to be able to have that and to be able to look back and say, like, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, kind of like what you just alluded to, but much nicer. You said it much nicer than I did. For somebody who's, starting out in their professional life, which I'm not sure if there's a lot of folks doing that these days with the evolution of working, via social media. But for the youth, the younger folks, the 20 somethings that are starting out today, is there a piece of advice, or is there something that you would say to somebody who's starting out? Like, this is something you're going to have to deal with, or what would you do in this situation? Like, how would you guide them?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the workplace is so complex, right? Understand the lay of the land. Identify a mentor that's been with or a buddy that's been with the organization for a couple of years so that they can kind of decode it for you, right? Because you do want to understand what are the unwritten rules so that you don't hit any landmines. And then also understand what does success look like for that organization, right? And in that success, right, where do you fit? Understand the mission, the value, understand the business itself. It's really important to understand how the business works, and your role. How does your role impact all of that, right? And then understand as well, what is the career trajectory? And hopefully those questions were asked in the interview. So you know what you're working towards and how you will be evaluated. It's very important to know how you will be evaluated. How often will you receive feedback? I think the worst thing a leader can do, and I know it's not deliberate because no one likes giving feedback, but wait until the end of year. It's so funny. Every company is the same. Well, that I've seen, heard of, but, you get to the end of year and it's the annual review. I think about all the things that they've done. Well, what didn't they do? Somewhat of the halo effect. They did an amazing job the last 3 months, and all of a sudden, rock star, you're great, you're wonderful, and forgot all the things that took place in the first and second quarter. Or something went wrong, and it's like you did have this horrible review,
right?
Not factoring in all the contributions that took place in the beginning of the year. So, know what the feedback cadence is. It's very important to give feedback along the way, so you know what you're doing well, and then you also know what you need to improve upon. So, it's hard walking in the doors of a new organization. I also say, listen, make sure you pay attention to the things that are said and the things that are not said, and ask questions. I think that's really the most important thing. Ask questions. Don't make assumptions. Assumptions can take you in the wrong direction, but ask questions and make sure you have clarity, especially, if you're working on a high profile project or just any project in general. Make sure you have clarity, understand the expectations, and how you'll be evaluated and with the work that you produce.
It's interesting. Well, one thing I will say, I do it to this day, and I do it with my team to this day, like even the junior folks. I'm like, if you see something that I'm doing that you think could be done differently, I'm like, I really want you to tell me. I'm like, because you're going to look at things at a whole different perspective, and you might know some technology that I'm completely unaware of because I was raised in the day and age where we still used fax machines. So if you know about something, let me know, because I want to do good too here. My approach, it's very interesting because I think our approaches are probably similar in observation wise. For every poor manager that I had, I would always look at the situation like, let me just take a step back here. This is not personal. Well, maybe for them it was, but for me it wasn't. I always try to keep that in mind. I'm like, this is not personal. This is business. You don't have to like me, but we need to get an alignment on what do I need to do to make this job roll, fit? What do I have to do here? So there was always that element, but you always walk away from a situation with some kind of knowledge. So even if your manager was really awful and you felt like they were sucking the life out of you, which happens, you can still walk away from that situation and say, I learned how to not behave. I know I was put in this position. So I know that at some point down the line, if I choose to be managing people, or if I get to that point, I know not to do this to other people. I know how to respond here. A little bit of a funny story. When I started, new college graduate, I thought I, knew it all. And and back then, I used to use the line, fake it until you make it. And so I thought it was part of my success would be pretending like I knew what I was talking about, even though I didn't. And to some degree in communications, that's a thing, so to some degree, but I didn't ask any questions. So it was my first project at this agency that I was working at the time. They rolled the dice on me, and I didn't ask questions because I was like, well, I'll figure it out. I'll just figure this out on my own. And I also had the mindset, look, I'll just ignore it. Like maybe like nobody will notice that I really don't know what I'm talking about, until it actually came back to bite me. And so I was at that time working in logistics, and I was told that I had to order airport signage. I had no idea what that meant. And it seems a little logical, like you have to order a sign for the airport. I had no clue what that meant. 23-year-old Jenny was like, oh, I'm ordering a bunch of signage. Maybe one of these will be good for them, and that's what they need. But I never actually asked the specific question. So the day comes where we have hundreds of people arriving for an event, and they're like, okay, so where's the signs for the airport? And I was like, what? What? And laugh, no, because I'm like, but at the time I remember like my stomach like fell to my feet, and I was like, oh my God, I actually screwed something up here because I didn't open my mouth. And they moved along. Like they figured it out, because there was a lot of professionals there that knew what to do for pivots. They figured it out. Everything went fine. But at the very end, after everything was said and done, the VP, like, she pulls me aside and she says to me, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you need to rethink what your focus will be. Maybe this isn't the industry for you. And I didn't cry in her office, but I walked my high heels down to the bathroom and I cried a little bit. I pulled myself together, and I took that as a challenge. And I didn't fold under the pressure. And I was like, you know what? I can do this, and I can do this better, and I can really throw myself in here and learn everything I can. And I'm going to show them, like, Jenny has got this. My maiden, Jenny Dio, has got this. Like, she's going to kill it. And I did eventually. And I got promotions and I did all this stuff. But it was really that pivotal moment of like, Jenny, you have to ask questions. You don't know what you're talking about. You need to open your mouth and say, like, I'm not sure what to do here. And I think that is something also that gets lost, especially with like younger folks. Like, they don't want to seem stupid, so they're not going to ask the question. And you have to have the dialogue.
And it builds rapport, right? Mm-hmm. It builds rapport. And you're right. I think we all have had that moment of like, darn it. And I try, I mean, just think about, the leader that you had at that time. If that person would have said, look, wasn't the best look.
Yeah, she did not come at me that way.
Right. If she would have coached you differently, you still would have had the aspiration, and you still would have felt challenged, but you would have felt more secure and probably would have got there faster.
Absolutely. And I will say, it's funny that you mentioned that, because now I reflect a lot on those situations. And I do think to myself, like, what could have been a better way to handle that from like the leadership perspective? Now, that agency also had the phrase trial by fire.
Oh.
And I was flat out told, this is how we do it. You will get thrown in, and then we're going to see if you can sink or swim. And, young Jenny took this as like,
not a strategy, by the way.
No, it's not. This is a terrible idea. This is awful. But like, I truly was like, oh, all right. I was like, this is how it's done. And I'm going to make it. And I'm going to prove to everyone that I'm going to be successful here, and I'm going to figure this out. And that's just not the way to go. Now, granted, like, yeah, sure, I learned a lot, but that's not nearly how I would do things now. And when I train people now, it's much more of like, I call them working sessions. I love doing working sessions with people. Like, ask me questions, like, go through it and let me guide you as you go. That's how you're going to learn. And then you're not going to make mistakes, and you're not going to be stressed and have anxiety all the time.
Yeah. The best leadership that I've seen, and just reflecting on that organization in particular, I mean, they were so high thriving, but they literally had like a template for executing pretty much everything. And if they didn't have it, they would together figure it out and then make it happen. But they would have a framework. So someone coming in didn't have to stumble through it.
Right.
And that's the worst thing, to stumble through it and people watch and then place judgment, and then you're put into a category.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not leadership. But what I've seen is where the organization had the highest response was having a template for, okay, this is how we execute this particular project, right? Okay. They do a postmortem, debrief, and it's an effort where walking in, you have the playbook, right, to execute. And when you have the playbook, you can get the work out faster, and it's a lot crisper, right? And it builds confidence, and it also within the organization, it builds trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been in seen some organizations where people will watch and then they'll swoop in to save the day
Yeah.
of what they created, right? And
Yeah.
so, and that creates a lot of distrust. So, leadership matters. I say it all the time. It really does. And the workforce today, they want to be in an environment where there's authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
people mean what they say, where they can learn and grow, where there's trust, and where they feel they can belong,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a little different than when you and I were going through.
Oh, it's totally different.
Oh, there's a job. Go do it.
Like I
Don't
said, I'm telling you, man, I had some scary interviews in the beginning where they were like, you will do extra hours and you will be working until, and I was like, but at the time, like, obviously, like, I didn't know any better. I was like, okay, absolutely. Like, this is what I got to do to be successful. I'm going to do it.
Well, it's different now. Folks coming in for interviews, Fridays, don't work over. I mean,
right? Work-life balance is like is actual real. It's real.
There's a checklist to it, right? Good. I do. I think having the balance is so important. I know there's some organizations where they have their leaders take a day off just to do something totally different. Just that kind of reboot, refresh, and keep the creativity flowing. Because if you're on the grind all the time, there's no way that you can reboot, step back, reflect, analyze. I mean, because you're always, in the gerbil wheel of things. I think it's important to have a little bit of balance. I work really hard to have balance, right? Someone once told me, and it was really good advice, you have your entire life to have a career. You have one opportunity to be a parent. And, as a working mom, that was always a juggle for me. Oh my gosh, I have to stay until the end. I have to go pick up my daughter, but I have to stay until the end. They're going to think that I'm a slacker, but I have to go pick up my daughter. I shouldn't have to choose, right? And so, I do appreciate, the workforce today where they're not going to choose. They're going to say, look, I'm going to give you my all. And oh, by the way, I got to go pick up my daughter. And so, and I think that's smart for the employee, and it's also smart for the organization. So the reality is that I truly believe people show up to give their best. I really do. And for the most part, most people give you more than 40 hours a week.
Oh, 100%.
100%, right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there are challenges with the new workforce, but I also appreciate a lot of the thought processes with this new workforce.
I think I like the flexibility more now. And I will say this, and I've actually said this quite a bit to other folks too. I think the only reason why I was able to gain the momentum and the success that I was able to get was because I was able to transition to just fully working from home. And I know that. I know deep in my soul, like, that's the only reason why I can juggle and be able to be everywhere that I am. Because like what you just said, there's calls that run all the way to, the 5:30 mark. And I'm like, my child has an event or whatever they need to be at like 5:45. So that means now, and it was funny, like I was telling one of my team members the other day, it was like 12:30 in the afternoon, and we're just taking a chat, like you said, one-on-one call, just a chat, like see what's up and check in. And I said to her, I was like, look, I hope you don't mind this. I was like, I have to cook dinner while you're on the phone with me. And she was like, it's 12:30. And I said, I'm like, the kids get home at 4. They have activities at 5:30. I have a call until 5 o'clock. That means that will only give me 20 minutes maybe to get everybody fed and then back out the door. And I'm like, my husband's here and he helps, like, absolutely. But I need to do my part and show up and like make sure that they have food so that he can deal with that part. It's a partnership of making sure things are flowing. But that juggle for working moms is very real, and it's very intense. There's a lot of days too where if I know I have a busy day and I know that it also includes kids' activities, I'll get up and start working at 4:30 in the morning, because I know that that's the only way that I can feasibly fit everything in that has to get done. And I'm dedicated to both parts of my life. I'm very dedicated to my kids, and I don't want them to. There was, for a very long time, they only saw me working. And it was a consistent, like, they would get very upset because they knew mommy was working all the time. And there was constant conference calls. And that was back when I felt like I had to overcompensate so much because I had 3 small children. And I've had clients tell me, well, you can't do your job because you're a mother. you can't do this job because, you're not going to, that must be why you're not doing well. And I've had clients talk to me like that. And I remember, I'm like, I am doing my job well. Like, I have children, but that does not affect my ability to be a professional here. And so I'm very cautious. It took me a long time. And I was 37 or so when I had that epiphany moment of, I only have one shot at being a mom. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was put on this project and I was like stuck on it for like 3 weeks. I had said I couldn't handle it. I said my workload was already too full. But, as you know, like when you're good at your job, it's like being, the punishment for being good, you're going to get more stuff. And so I was put on this really intense project for like 3 weeks. I was just on it. And my boss was nowhere to be found. She kind of just floated off into the abyss. She should have been handling it, but she just kind of left me to deal with it. And me being dedicated to my team, I couldn't just let them flail about. I had to do it. So for 3 weeks, I didn't see my kids. Like, I was working from home, but my husband was home with them. It was summertime, so he was in the pool with them and hanging out with them and doing all the fun stuff. And I was stuck in my office. And when it was all done, I remember like I came out of the office and they were like, "Are you done? Like, are you finally done?" They were like bigger. And I was like, and my whole heart, like, totally crushed. And I remember like in that moment saying like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, for work, I'm valued, but I'm also replaceable. I'm not replaceable here at home. So it's there's a very serious dance that women have to do to like balance both of those worlds.
Yeah. I went through that same process. And when my youngest was, I think Athena was she was 8. I think it was 8, but she was, joking, and this was my mommy. And she said she had a a little cup, and the cup was the phone, and she was just talking. Wait. On. Hold on. And she kept putting the finger.
Yeah.
And I just sat and cried. I was like, that is not.
I know. They do that to me too. But it was.
But you're right. It is a juggle. And I will say one of the things that I am so grateful for, I really have a good village around me. And there's no way I could have done half the things without the village, my family and friends, because we cannot do it all. And I think there's an expectation that we do it all. And I don't think people understand all that goes into it. I always say I have the utmost respect for stay-at-home mom. That is the hardest job.
Oh my gosh.
That is the hardest job. And I will take someone that has been a stay-at-home mom over a bunch of other candidates because I know the nuances that they balance, juggle, make decisions, and multitask and lead.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about all the different dynamics that go into a day. Some of those dynamics exist in the workplace, right? And I do think we need to give each other more grace. I really do. It's so easy to say, oh, I would do this if I were you. No, you would not.
Yeah, no.
So I think we need to give each other grace, and it is a juggle, right? And it's not easy. There are some things I did extremely well, and then there are some things I just totally bombed. Right. And when we're parents, it's not like there's this book. I don't care what Dr. Spock says.
No.
And I always say Dr. Spock never met my kids. So, there's some things we know will work. And then there are just some things we know just will not. We got to figure it out. And each child is different. They have different needs, different love languages. And my one daughter, it's time that's really important. So I need to sit still and not multitask with her.
Yeah, they get offended.
Yeah, right. And my parents multitask all the time.
I know. Right? I don't ever remember a sit down. And now I
never even said anything, but like these kids are different. So, but my youngest is totally different, right? She just wants to know 1, 2, 3. Okay, can I go now? And they just have different needs. So understanding those dynamics too are important. Even with some of the things that I create, I have my kids in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I try to create within the space of what I'm doing. I try to incorporate them or at least connect in because they're learning from us. They're learning how to be entrepreneurs. They're learning how to be business people. They're learning how to have a strong work ethic. Yes, they're learning all these things, right? And a good work ethic is very important no matter what people do.
Mm-hmm.
However, they're also learning how to be on a grind without balance. And so it's important, that we kind of figure out how to balance that out. And we're still trying to figure that out too, right? But I think there's an expectation of moms that are just higher.
Yeah.
Like my daughter, what do you mean? Well, why can't you? Well, what do you mean? This just drives me crazy. I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course, I need to do this first before I do that. But I think because we do it all, they feel we can really do it all. And so they don't see or understand the work that goes into doing it all. I now spend more time explaining, hey, in order for me to do this, I have to do this. I didn't go to school straight through in my younger years. I'm 58. So in my 40s, I went back to school to get my MBA. In my 50s, I went back to school for a PhD. So these are different cycles of time.
Right.
And so it's interesting, achieving my MBA, my daughter only saw, the output of that. My PhD, because it was during COVID, she saw the work that went into it different. And that's when it dawned on me, they need to really understand the work that goes into it. And so she saw, like there'll be days I never move from my chair. I'm just reading and researching and typing and writing. And she's like, what's wrong with you? I said, oh, can you give me some water, please? But she saw, and there was a lot of hard work and tears too. It was just like, what do you mean you marked up my paper? This is a great paper. But, she saw the work and the rigor that went into that as well to achieve that accomplishment,
I like that. It's interesting because I'm doing the same approach with my kids. Like I'll explain to them like in detail, and it's actually very funny because we've been doing that since they were little. Like since they could talk, my husband and I explain things to them in detail. So you imagine like a little 3-year-old sitting there and I'm like, listen, mommy has to do this, this, and this. Okay. And in order to do all these things, then we can do that. And they're like, okay, mommy, but because we've been doing it for forever, now they do understand and they have a little bit more of a grasp of like, for example, if I've had just a lot of phone calls throughout the day, not that I've had a bad day, but it was just a lot of phone calls throughout the day. And, when you're leading, and I want to talk a little bit more about servant leadership because I want to do the due diligence there. But when you are a servant leader, you actually have a lot more on your plate. So there's a misconception of like, oh, like when you're in a leadership position, like you're just delegating and delegating, that's it, and you walk away. And that's really not the case because now you're responsible for people and you actually work harder because you need to make sure that you're taking these people under your wing and really teaching them properly. So I'll get to the end of the day sometimes and I will feel like I've given all I've got already. But that can't be the case because I have 3 children that are looking to me for everything. For this moment, and I know I only have a couple more years of this, I'm everything.
Yeah.
So I take that really seriously. So I get to the end of the day sometimes and I forget, I don't remember what activity we're going to. I think it was like religious class. I think it was their religion class. And it was like 5:00 or it was 5:30 because we were late. And I'm rushing them over to the thing. And all 3 of my kids talk at the same time. They have no regard for each other. They will all be talking to me, but all at the same time. And I turn, and the music was on in the car too. So I turned the music off. I was like, please, I need all of you to just be quiet for the rest of the car ride. I was like, just don't talk. I was like, I'm so sorry. I know mommy's being mean right now, but please just be quiet. And it was like really quiet. And then all of a sudden my son was like, wait, for how long? And I was like, just, I was like, just, and then like one of his sisters like, shh, mommy said to be quiet. And he's like, I'm trying to figure out how long. And then they started like going back and I was like, oh my God.
Clarity, that's all.
He's like, I need a time frame. He's very, he's my litigator. He's like going to be, I think he's going to end up being something in that capacity because everything you say to him, he comes back. He's like, okay, but what if, right? If I do it like this and maybe like this, like, then I can do this. And we're like, oh my God. He told me the other day, like, I forget like what it was. And he was like, yeah, but it's okay because I do this and Bobby lets me do it because he's tired and he doesn't want to argue with me. So he knows, I know I'm going to be able to do this. And I'm like, oh, you've already got us figured out like that. Regarding servant leadership though, because that is, I think, a fairly new term in the business world. Not new, all the way new, but I don't feel like it's used as much. Is it? Am I right in saying that? Because I've talked about this a little bit and people seem to look at me like I'm crazy.
So I think people struggle with the word servant. So I've heard a lot of folks say service leadership.
Okay.
I think people struggle with the word servant, and the concept itself has been around for a long time. But the reason why I am a fan, of course, of servant leadership or service leadership is I do think there's something to the way that employees want to be led today. And a servant leader will look at the team, the dynamics of the team, the nuances of the team, and look at how can I get the best out of this group, and how can I help cultivate, evolve, and help folks transform or even grow in their career trajectory, right? So that's a little different. That's where you're literally taking the time to get to know the person. Jenny, I want to get to understand, well, how do you like to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about your background, because that has a lot of impact and influence to how you will approach your work, right? Versus, here's the task, get it done, and I don't care what you do Monday through Friday or Saturday or Sunday. Servant leader will have a little bit more, still business focus,
Mm-hmm.
right? It doesn't take away from the business focus. And I think sometimes people kind of get that confused, but it's not actually, they're very focused on the business outcome, but they're also focused on, okay, these are the people that are going to get this work out the door. Let me see how I can help them have clarity, understanding, but also what are their drivers? How can I help them have success? How can I give them feedback to have success, right? And there's more of an investment in the person's development, right? So there is a little bit of that. I found that when I was researching servant leaders, the ones that really stood out were the ones that took that extra step. Servant leaders, there's these different characteristics, and awareness is one. I think it's more than that. The ones that really had the most success had more than awareness. They were almost accountable to their team. They were accountable to developing, their folks. And so that's a little bit different than having awareness or cultural awareness. Something that's more of a check the box to me.
Mm-hmm.
Having cultural awareness, and that's one of the characteristics. But it's more of having awareness that yes, Jenny might be from a different country. She has different customs. That's also wrapped in the way she approaches her work. So how can we get the benefit of that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let me understand what that is. And that's a little bit different. And that builds trust. The reason why that's important is that builds trust, right? It also, I think, as leaders, it expands our learning, right? I mean, everybody's had those. I had one leader, like he would only talk like in jargon that he got from MTV, and I don't even use that jargon, right? But he assumed that that's the way I talk, right? And it was so off-putting, but it was what he thought was right,
Right.
And it kind of gave him a pass of really getting to know me. And I never used. I mean, he went for months just having this conversation this way. I never used any of the words that he used, right? But it was cool to him, and he thought that's people like me, that's the way we talked, right? But he didn't take any time to really know me, right? And so I think the workforce today has somewhat of that same dynamic. They want to know that they belong.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know that they can contribute, and they want to know that you have a vested interest in their career development, right? In order for that to take place, you have to have a conversation with folks, right? And so I think when leaders, at least based on my observation, when leaders take the time to really understand the nuances of their folks, they not only have a stronger team, but they have stronger trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the dynamics are more authentic versus I've worked with folks that, I mean, they live in every stereotype. And so you're literally working to prove yourself, but you're also working to prove that the stereotypes don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
That's exhausting, right? And so I think the workforce today is just creating, and they're creating their own dynamic, right, of how they want to be in the workplace. And I think that's fair, right?
Absolutely.
You look at, you spend more than 40 hours a week at a company.
Oh, yeah.
You want it to mean something. You want it to count for something, right? Yes, you get a paycheck, but you're also
You're
creating.
showing up. Yeah, you're creating something. It's interesting because the dynamics of an organization and your team dynamics, the folks that you're working with, it's so important. Exactly what you just said, that there's like valuable, like personal transactions that are happening in conversations because yes, like you're focused on the work and I have that problem, by the way, and I think it's because of, how I came up in the industry. I have that problem where I will dive right into the project and I forget that like no, but there's people here and you don't know how if they had a rough night, if something happened or, what have you, they're going through a breakup, like whatever it is, there's people on the other end of this line. So like Jenny, ease up a little bit. And so I actually have to mental check myself to like, you don't have to like dive right in. Like make sure you ask people like, oh, how was your weekend? How are you doing? Like what's what? Where I currently work, I was really surprised because like all the way up the ladder in the organization, we jumped on this call. There was all these top people in and I was like, oh my gosh, and I was new. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to make sure I'm on it and I know what I'm doing here. And they like chatted for 10 minutes about something really silly. And everybody was kind of laughing and just, joking around with each other. And I was like, we're on like a deadline. What is going on right now? I was very like thrown off because I was used to, and I've always been used to like going direct in, here's the orders, that's it, move on. And it's actually taken me, I've been with my organization for 2 months and it's taken me a minute to get used to the fact that like everyone humanly talks to each other and it's not like, barking orders and that's it. And so it's very interesting. As personal as I am, it's taking me some getting used to for that.
It's happening. Life is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Life is definitely happening for folks. And sometimes you just need a break.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need a break. And people need to know that they can feel safe in doing that. Right? People need to feel safe. Because listen, I don't care how many robots you build, you still need people to do the job.
Honestly.
Robots are being built these days, but and it still needs humanity, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So.
We still need to like, and even now that, and I mentioned like I work from home. I've been working from home since 2017. And I've noticed in that dynamic, and I mentioned this earlier, that I think people get used to that and then they forget that there is a human on the other side of the line that's a person. And, when I was transitioning out of my last agency, it was a rough go and we kept trying to make it work. And it was just a mismatch of personalities. It's really what it boiled down to. It was really just a mismatch of personalities. And I got to the end there and I remember thinking to myself, like, what are you doing? Like, if you were dating someone for 2.5 years and it was this hard,
right,
you would have broken up with them already. So what are you doing here? Like, what are you trying to force? Like, it's not working. That is what it is. And it was actually a little bit funny because when I resigned, that's actually exactly what I said. I was like, it's really just a mismatch of personalities. Like, I love the work. I love the clients. Like, I love all the stuff. But like, when it came to actually working in the process of it, it was a total mismatch. And I walked away though, still feeling good because I was like, it's okay. I'm not for everybody. Yeah. And that has to be okay. I shouldn't be for everybody. And it goes to that authenticity that you were talking about earlier. If I'm really being authentic and true to myself and it's just not working for wherever I am, that doesn't mean that they're wrong or that I'm wrong. It just means it's a mismatch. That's okay. And you don't have to continue to bang your head against the wall. You could just open the door and go out the other side. Like, this doesn't have to be a thing. And
it's
I think
interesting you say that. I've seen that in other organizations as well, where if you have to work really hard to understand the company culture, and only one or two people really understand the company culture, it's probably the culture that they created.
Right.
And so you're never going to be able to crack that code. Because then that means there will have to be change.
Right.
And some companies or whoever's leading it don't want the change.
Right.
And so if you represent change, then they will continue creating cycles that only they set the parameters around, right? And that's not a fun way to work.
No, and it's okay. And that's the other thing too, myself included. People get stuck being like, I can't leave because I've only been here for 6 months and that'll look bad on my resume. And I don't know so much that that's even like real anymore. I think people understand now like that sometimes things just don't work out. I have a couple places on my resume where I was only there for a year or a little over a year. There was one place I was only there for like 9 months, and I was like, nah, it's just not working. Like and it happens, and you have to kind of just be okay with it and go with it. But it's still like a learning experience. I will say what in one of my really, really early agencies was when I first learned about emotional intelligence, and you touched on it earlier, so I want to talk about that. I remember I was struggling at this agency. It was kind of toxic. But I was dealing with it because, again, I thought that I didn't have a choice. And so I was dealing with it, and I was just making sure I kept my head down, do your job, suck it up, because you need to work. And so I just kept moving forward with it. And while I was there, one of the human resources person gave me this book, and she was like, you should check it out. It's really cool. And I read it, and it changed how I approached everything. Because I can't remember what the book was called, but I'm going to have to look it up and see if I could figure out what it was, because I read the book and I remember going through it. And then afterwards, I was able to almost like an out of body experience, take a step back and just observe the room.
Yeah.
And pick up on cues that it's in the tone of voice, it's in the eye contact, it's in the mannerisms, it's in the facial expressions. Like, there's so much more being communicated than what's coming out of our mouths. And you can observe it virtually too. So I'm 100% virtual. And when I'm speaking with clients, I can see it. I can just see it on their faces, and I can sense their energy through the call. That's part of why I'm able to be, doing well at my job, because I can pick up on these cues. And something that I've developed over the past 18 years was being able to foster trust with clients and being able to make sure they understand, like, I'm here for you. I'm here to elevate you. So tell me what you need, and I'm going to show up for you. Not everybody is very direct, and you kind of have to feel it out. But emotional intelligence is something that, like, I've talked to people about quite a bit, to say, like, if you don't know anything about it, you really should start researching it, start looking things up, because this is like a really crucial thing for us.
Absolutely. 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 And having empathy. I agree. I think the world needs a lot more of what's going on now. But, I think for some, it might be a reconditioning,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because, we were just talking about how we kind of grew up in the workplace, and it's different now, where the workforce today, they look for the EQ and
Mm-hmm.
empathy first. So, how leaders lead with that, which is really critical for some. Yeah. And not saying that one style is, I want to make sure I'm clear. One style is not better than the other. You do need all work styles, depending on the environment, the company culture, right? In the business. You do need all styles. What's important is knowing how to adapt to the team that you're leading. Right. So it's not forcing the team to conform to the leader's style. The leader has to be a little agile and know how to get the best out of their team. Right. And so that sometimes creates a pivot for some.
And that takes time too. I mean, this is not like you rip the Band-Aid off and everything is all well and good. It's a consistent, as you said earlier, it starts with the leader, and the leader setting the example. But there has to be a consistency of making sure that it's understood. Like, I'm setting this example, but I expect this from my people. And really, like, paying attention and digging in with each person and making sure you get to know these people. And, I follow Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Okay. So I actually worked at the bank next to the wine store that his family owned. And I remember, like, I was doing the bank transaction. I was like 19, and obviously I didn't know, like, he wasn't anybody at that point. And it was very funny to me because, like, several years later, a friend of a friend hands me this book and was like, hey, like, read this book by this guy. And I started reading it, and I was like, wait, I know this person. So I've actually paid attention to his career trajectory, and he talks quite a bit about, like, he talks to his people. He makes it a point to have everybody. He talks to everybody. It doesn't matter what level they are. He makes sure that he talks to everybody, and he impresses upon his organization what he expects from people. And that's how people show up. A nod to also, like, my current boss, because she shows up the way she does with so much emotional intelligence, and she does care so much about the team, and because she is a servant leader, hands down, because she shows up like that, I actually show up more because I know that how hard she's working on things, and I know what she's expecting. And because I'm seeing that, I actually will press myself harder to make sure that I'm doing better, so that I can support her. And the team shows up more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it has this beautiful like waterfall effect of like, we're all showing up because we're here to support each other. And at the end of the day, before everybody's logging off, everyone checks in. Hey, are you okay? Does anyone need anything before I go? Are we all good? Does anyone have late night work? It's a beautiful thing to say.
Yeah, I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
Tenia, do you have, if you had something that you'd want to say to the listeners from this conversation, an important highlight that you think would be a key takeaway, what would it be? I like to do this to all of my guests, by the way, and everyone comes out with something totally different.
I think the world is so polarized now. I think we need to give each other more grace. And if a moment in time can create an energy of intensity, I won't give it a label, then I would think that another movement can create something positive. So I would like to create something positive. And I think in the workplace, just a simple, hey, can I help you out with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
If whether you're a leader or not, take the time to help someone else do their job better, you'll have a stronger workplace. And also the humanity in us comes out, right? And I would like to have a movement like that. How can we help each other be better? And how can we help our work environment be better? Right? And sometimes it just might be, thank you. You did that extremely well. And I appreciate the work that you produced today. Or I appreciate the things that you did. Or thank you for the information you gave me. It helped me do my job better. Or, it might be a little better outcome if you do this. Do you mind if I show you? Right? I just think if we start using different language, I think we're in such a state to where everything is you versus me, I'm right, you're wrong, up versus down, that we're not looking for commonalities. And we have more in common. We have more in common than we do different, right? And there's nothing wrong with being different, right? Different is good. But when you look at what you have in common, you will accept more of what is different. And so I think our focus is in the wrong place. And if we're going to truly rise to the occasion of who we all are, then part of that is how we show up. And so I would like to see more of that. The last piece in my book, Servant Leadership, I talk a lot about how having a servant leadership mentality and mentoring, how one could do that. And I literally wrote the book that way. So a person wouldn't have to read through chapters and chapters just to know, oh, I'm only supposed to do this. Okay. I literally wrote both books and how to give feedback, because those are the two. Feedback in every company has been like the most painful process for folks. I don't want to tell someone, I don't want to give bad news. And so I created a really simple, to really just from the things that I've been doing my entire career. But I wanted something that any sort of leader, any stage, wherever they are, could just pick it up and say, oh, okay, this is how I can walk through a conversation and be productive. But it starts with us.
And what's the name of the book?
So I have two. There's the book on servant leadership. Is 8 Essential Steps to Inspire Others and Build a Thriving Workforce. The Leadership Advantage. Is such a long title, I know. And then the other book is The Feedback Blueprint, Unlocking the Power of Constructive Insights. I think both offer very simple tools. At least I wrote it so that it was easy to understand. There is some academic aspects to it, just to kind of give some of the science behind, how people hear, how people see things, and talk a lot about Johari's window as well, which is kind of a concept of how you see yourself and how others see you. And then which you don't see, which are your blind spots. And so, I think both offer, the reader, one, you don't have to read through pages and pages of work, but it gives tools as well so someone could take it and use it right away.
And I will say this, listeners, I'm going to link those books in the episode description. And what I'd like to highlight here is you don't have to be in a leadership position to learn from these books. So even if you're like fresh starting out and, you're very junior and you're figuring your way out, this kind of literature will help ground you in really good practices for communication and interoffice communication and how to handle situations. You could always manage up. That's a very serious thing. I manage up consistently. Like, that's a really big deal. And I want to advise, like, if you are starting out in any industry, this is going to be anything, because in all industries you have to communicate. These kinds of books are really important. So I am going to link the books in the podcast description so you can take a look at them, because that's, if you're really looking to further your career, like, this is it. This is the way to be successful. And it may not be the most popular aggressive, but you don't always have to be the aggressor. Like, this is just a way to go about it where you can really find some really good gold nuggets there. And I want to really call that out.
And then on my website, my blog,
Mm-hmm.
I deliberately put out almost every other day, but I put out content so leaders can just go somewhere and get quick information, right? It's free. And sometimes leaders just need, hey, what do I do? What do I say? And so I try to create that content in my blog.
And is that on Leadership Wise?
Okay. Leadershipwise.com.
Leadership. Awesome. Tenia, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been such a pleasure. I would literally hold you hostage all day and hang out with you. That's where I'm at this point. I'll just bring the kids over. We can just.
That's right. Exactly. You run everywhere. It's okay. My kids come over all the time, and
it's fine. They're cool. They'll hang out. Thank you so much for joining me today. And listeners, thank you for hanging out with us. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.
Talk soon. Thank you.